The discharge papers trembled in my hands as I stood in the hospital corridor, staring at the word complications typed in cold, sterile font beneath my daughter's name. 24 hours ago, she had walked into this building for a routine appendectomy, laughing about how she'd finally have an excuse to binge-watch her favorite shows during recovery. Now, a white sheet covered her body in the morgue downstairs. Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. My legs buckled, and I caught myself against the mint green wall, the same color I'd stared at for 6 hours while waiting for what should have been a simple surgery. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, drilling into my skull like angry wasps. My fingers crumpled the papers, leaving damp marks from my palms. The doctor's signature sat at the bottom, a careless scrawl that had signed away my Jasmine's life with the stroke of a pen. I pushed through the double doors marked Administration, my sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. The reception desk sat empty except for a young woman typing on her computer, her manicured nails clicking rhythmically against the keys. She didn't look up when I approached, didn't see the mother who'd just lost everything standing 3 feet away. I slammed the papers onto her desk. I need to speak with Dr. Chen. Now. The receptionist finally raised her eyes, scanning my face with the practiced indifference of someone who'd witnessed grief 1,000 times before. She reached for her phone, pressed 3 buttons, and murmured something I couldn't hear over the roaring in my ears. He's in surgery. Someone will be with you shortly. I gripped the edge of her desk, my knuckles turning ashen against my brown skin. The waiting room chairs behind me held other families, other people wrapped in their own bubbles of worry and hope. They still had hope. I wanted to scream at them, warn them that hope was a dangerous thing in a place like this. Minutes crawled by. I counted the tiles on the ceiling, 42 across, 31 down. Jasmine used to count things when she was nervous too, tapping her fingers in patterns only she understood. She'd done it the morning of her surgery, drumming against the admission desk while filling out forms. The memory sliced through me, sharp and sudden. A door opened to my left. A woman in a pristine white coat emerged, clipboard pressed against her chest like armor. Her heels clicked with authority as she approached, her expression carefully neutral, professionally sympathetic. I recognized that look. I'd seen it on the faces of social workers, lawyers, everyone who'd ever delivered bad news wrapped in bureaucratic language. Mrs. Robinson, I'm Amanda Prescott, the hospital's patient relations director. Please, come with me. I followed her down a corridor lined with framed certificates and achievement awards. Each plaque celebrated excellence, commitment to care, life-saving innovations. The irony burned like acid in my throat. She led me into a small conference room with a round table and tissue boxes strategically placed at intervals. They'd designed this space for devastation. Ms. Prescott gestured to a chair, but I remained standing. She sat anyway, opening her clipboard with practiced efficiency. We understand this is an incredibly difficult time. The hospital extends its deepest condolences. What happened to my daughter? My voice came out stronger than I felt. Ms. Prescott's pause lasted just a fraction too long, her eyes darting to her notes before meeting mine again. As Dr. Chen explained, there were unexpected complications during the procedure. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, the body reacts unpredictably to anesthesia. I moved closer to the table, my shadow falling across her paperwork. Something in her explanation didn't align with what the surgeon had mumbled to me in the hallway at 3 a.m. His words rushed and defensive. He'd mentioned bleeding, mentioned delays, mentioned things that contradicted the neat narrative she was presenting now. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening against the fake wood grain. The surface felt cold, sterile, just like everything else in this building that had swallowed my daughter whole and spit out excuses. Dr. Chen said complications, but the surgeon mentioned bleeding, mentioned waiting for equipment. Which is it? Ms. Prescott's pen stopped moving. Just for a second, but I caught it. Her jaw tightened, smoothing into that professional mask again before she could answer. She shuffled papers, creating noise to fill the silence, to give herself time to construct whatever response they'd trained her to deliver. Medical procedures involve many factors, Mrs. Robinson. I'm sure Dr. Chen provided you with a comprehensive... He provided me with nothing. I slammed my hand down. The tissue boxes jumped. So did she. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the shock still ricocheting through my body, the kind that had me standing in this room instead of planning Sunday dinner with Jasmine like we'd talked about 3 days ago. My daughter had been scared about the surgery, something routine they'd assured her, and I'd held her hand and promised everything would be fine because hospitals don't lie about routine. Miss Prescott stood, creating distance between us, moving toward the window that overlooked the parking lot. I watched her reflection in the glass, watched how her shoulders rose with a deep breath meant to center herself. They taught that in seminars probably, how to stay calm when grieving families demanded truth. I understand you're upset. My daughter is dead. The words tasted like metal, like finality. Ms. Prescott turned back to face me, and I saw something flicker across her features before the professional veneer settled back into place. Pity, maybe, or guilt. Hard to tell with these people who spent their careers deflecting blame. I pulled my phone from my purse, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my recent calls. Found the one from 2 nights ago? Jasmine's voice on my voicemail, nervous but trying to sound brave, telling me she'd see me after the procedure, that she loved me, that she'd call as soon as she woke up. The call that never came. Instead, Dr. Chen had appeared in that waiting room at dawn with his rumpled scrubs and inability to maintain eye contact. I want the surgical records, all of them. Ms. Prescott's expression shifted. Not much, just a tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible straightening of her spine. She moved back to the table, gathering her papers into a neat stack, buying time again with busy hands. Those documents are confidential medical files. We'll need to process your request through the proper channels. I'm her mother. I'm her next of kin. Of course. There's paperwork to complete, procedures to follow. I can have someone from medical records contact you next week to begin. Next week? I moved around the table, closing the distance she'd tried to create. She retreated half a step before catching herself, remembering her training again. Stand firm. Project authority. Never let them see you rattled. But I saw it anyway, that micro-expression of concern that flashed across her face when I got too close to whatever truth she'd been sent here to bury under condolences and administrative red tape. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Denise, asking if I needed her to come. Asking if I was okay. Questions without answers, just like everything in this hospital. I shoved the phone back in my purse, refocusing on Ms. Prescott and her clipboard full of scripted responses. She cleared her throat, regaining her composure. I know this is overwhelming. Perhaps we should schedule a follow-up meeting when you've had time to process. I've had time. 72 hours since Jasmine went into that operating room. 72 hours of doctors avoiding me, nurses speaking in hushed tones, and administrators like Ms. Prescott appearing with their strategic tissue boxes and careful words. Time enough to know when people were hiding something behind procedure and protocol. I reached across the table and flipped the folder open before Ms. Prescott could stop me. Her hand shot out, fingers splaying across the papers, but not before I caught sight of what she'd been guarding. Incident report. The words jumped out at me in bold typeface at the top of the page, partially obscured by her palm pressing down. Mrs. Robinson, please. Her voice climbed half an octave. You can't. I grabbed the edge of the paper and pulled. The folder slid across the polished wood, spilling its contents in a cascade of white and manila. Ms. Prescott lunged forward, trying to gather them, but my hands were faster. Adrenaline made my fingers nimble despite the arthritis that usually stiffened them by afternoon. The first page showed a timeline. I scanned it, my heart hammering against my ribcage hard enough to make my chest ache. Surgery scheduled for 2 p.m. Actual start time 3:47 p.m. That delay, no one had mentioned any delay. They'd told me everything went smoothly, that the complications came later. Unexpected and unavoidable. Ms. Prescott was on her feet now, reaching across the table. I turned my body, shielding the papers with my shoulder the way I used to protect my purse from purse snatchers on the subway. My eyes raced down the page, catching fragments. Wrong medication administered. Dosage error. Patient reaction severe. These are confidential. Ms. Prescott's hand landed on my wrist. Not pulling, not yet, but the pressure was there. A warning. You're putting me in a very difficult position. I yanked my arm free and stood, clutching the papers to my chest. The conference room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. My breath came short and sharp through my nose. Wrong medication. The words pulsed behind my eyes like a migraine building. Well, what medication? My voice sounded strange, too calm, like it belonged to someone else. Ms. Prescott circled the table, moving slowly, hands outstretched like I was a spooked animal that might bolt. Maybe I was. My muscles coiled tight, ready to run or fight. I couldn't tell which. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Let's sit down and discuss this properly. She gestured toward the chairs. I can arrange for Dr. Chen to join us. He can explain the medical aspects more thoroughly than… What? Medication. The papers crinkled in my grip. I looked down at them again, forcing my eyes to focus past the rage that blurred my vision. There, a form halfway down the stack. Pharmacy dispensation record. The drug name was long, full of syllables I couldn't pronounce, but next to it, someone had written in red ink, "Not indicated for this procedure." Below that, another note. See Variance Report 2847B. My hands started shaking. The papers rattled like dry leaves in wind. I set them on the table before I dropped them, spreading them out, searching for this variance report. Ms. Prescott made another move toward the documents, but I blocked her with my body, hip-checking the table edge. Mrs. Robinson, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from those files. I ignored her, found another page. This one had Jasmine's name at the top, her date of birth, her medical record number. Below that, a checkbox form. Standard pre-operative protocol. Followed? No. My daughter's name, typed in that sterile font next to that single word. No. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, suddenly too bright. I pressed my palms flat against the table, leaning my weight forward. My purse had fallen off my shoulder at some point. It lay on the floor near my feet, contents spilling out. Wallet, keys, the program from Jasmine's memorial service yesterday, with her face smiling up from the carpet. Ms. Prescott pulled out her phone. Her thumb moved across the screen, typing rapidly. Calling for backup probably, or security, or whoever they sent when grieving mothers stopped playing by the rules of polite devastation. Someone gave my daughter the wrong medication. Each word came out flat, hard-edged, statement of fact, not question. She lowered the phone, but didn't put it away. The situation was complicated. Multiple factors contributed to. Someone made a mistake, and my daughter died because of it. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Ms. Prescott's professional mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw what lay beneath. Not malice, not cruelty, but fear. She was afraid of me, or afraid of what I knew now, or afraid of what this meant for the hospital. Maybe all three. Heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway outside. Getting closer. The door swung open before either of us could move. A man in a gray suit filled the doorway, his frame blocking most of the light from the corridor. His badge hung from his belt. Hospital security, though his build and stance spoke more of police work or military background. He took in the scene with a practiced sweep of his eyes. Ms. Prescott standing rigid behind her desk, phone still clutched in her hand. Me on the opposite side with documents spread across the polished surface. "Everything all right here, ma'am?" His question directed itself at Ms. Prescott, not at me. I gathered the papers quickly, my hands moving with more coordination than I expected. The pages crinkled as I folded them, once, twice, then shoved them into my coat pocket. My fingers brushed against something else in there. Jasmine's hospital bracelet that I'd kept, the plastic still smelling faintly of antiseptic. Miss Prescott was just leaving. Miss Prescott's voice had regained its professional veneer, smooth as glass. The security guard stepped further into the room. His hand rested casually on his belt near the radio clip there. I noticed the way his weight distributed itself, ready to move. I'd cleaned enough corporate offices, worked enough night shifts in buildings where security taught me to read body language. This man expected trouble. I bent down, collecting my scattered belongings from the floor. The memorial program went back into my purse first, Jasmine's face disappearing into the leather interior. Keys next, then my wallet. A lipstick had rolled under Ms. Prescott's desk. I left it there. "I'm leaving." The words came out steadier than I felt. "But I'm taking these with me." I patted my coat pocket where the document sat. Ms. Prescott's eyes tracked the movement, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. She opened her mouth, closed it again. The security guard shifted his weight, waiting for her signal. "Those are confidential medical records," she finally said. "Hospital property. They're evidence of negligence. My daughter's death certificate says natural causes, but these papers tell a different story." The guard's radio crackled with static. A tinny voice emerged, something about a situation on the 4th floor, but he silenced it with a quick press of a button. His attention never left me. I moved toward the door. The guard didn't shift from his position blocking it. Up close, I could see the network of broken capillaries across his nose, the slight paunch pushing against his belt despite his otherwise athletic build. His name tag read, "Authorized personnel only." He'd turned it around backward, probably during some earlier task. "Excuse me?" I met his eyes directly, holding his gaze. For a long moment, none of us moved. The air conditioning kicked on with a mechanical wheeze, sending a draft across the room that rustled the remaining papers on Ms. Prescott's desk. I could smell his cologne, something cheap and overpowering, mixing with the lingering scent of Ms. Prescott's coffee. He stepped aside. The hallway stretched before me, fluorescent tubes casting their harsh light across linoleum floors buffed to a high shine. I'd walked these corridors 3 weeks ago when Jasmine was admitted for what should have been routine surgery. Routine. That word again, the one doctors loved to use, the one that made families lower their guard. My shoes clicked against the floor as I walked. Behind me, I heard Miss Prescott's voice, low and urgent, speaking to the guard. Couldn't make out the words, but the tone carried clearly enough. Instructions, warnings, damage control. At the end of the hallway stood the elevators. I pressed the down button, watched the numbers above the doors climb. 2, 3, 4. The folder of documents felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my pocket, pulling down one side of my coat. The elevator dinged. Doors slid open. Empty car, thank God. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor. Just as the doors began to close, a hand shot through the gap. They bounced back open. The security guard stepped in with me. The guard's bulk filled the small elevator car. I positioned myself in the corner, keeping my back to the wall and my eyes on him. His hand moved to his belt radio, fingers hovering over the call button. I shifted my weight forward, ready to block if he reached for the folder in my pocket. The elevator descended with a mechanical groan, passing the 3rd floor, then the 2nd. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the piped-in music that trickled from the overhead speaker. His finger pressed down on the radio button. I lunged forward, knocking his arm upward. The radio clattered against the elevator wall, still attached to his belt by its coiled cord. He grabbed my wrist with his free hand, thick fingers circling my arm like a vice. I twisted, using the momentum to drive my shoulder into his chest, pinning him against the handrail. The elevator stopped on the 1st floor. The doors opened to reveal a cluster of people waiting, a woman in scrubs, an elderly man with a walker, 2 visitors holding flowers. They stared at us, frozen mid-conversation. I released the guard and stepped backward, smoothing my coat. He straightened his uniform, face flushed red from collar to hairline. The radio swung from his belt, microphone dangling. "Going up," I said to the waiting crowd, gesturing toward the elevator. Nobody moved. The woman in scrubs pulled out her phone. The elderly man shuffled his walker backward. I walked past them into the main lobby, keeping my stride even and purposeful. Behind me, the elevator doors closed with the guard still inside. The lobby sprawled before me, all gleaming tile and glass walls. Information desk to the left, gift shop to the right, main entrance straight ahead. Security stationed at the doors, 2 guards this time, both watching the elevator banks with sudden interest. I turned right toward the gift shop. The automatic doors whooshed open as I approached. Inside, racks of cards and balloons created a maze of color. A teenage clerk sat behind the counter, scrolling through her phone. I moved between the aisles, heading toward the back of the store, where a door marked "Employees Only" stood partially ajar. Through the gap, I spotted a narrow hallway lined with storage boxes. I pushed through, letting the door swing shut behind me. The hallway led to a fire exit, red sign glowing above it. I hit the push bar hard. An alarm shrieked to life as I burst into the parking garage. Concrete pillars rose around me like a forest of gray trunks. My car sat 3 levels up, but going there now would be foolish. I ran toward the opposite end of the garage, shoes echoing off the low ceiling. A delivery truck idled near the loading dock, driver nowhere in sight. I ducked behind it, crouching low. Footsteps pounded into the garage behind me. Multiple sets, moving fast. I peered around the truck's massive tire. 3 security guards fanned out, heads swiveling. One spoke into his radio, the static-filled response crackling through the concrete space. The delivery truck's engine rumbled. I crawled along its length, using the vehicle as cover, until I reached the cab. The driver's door hung open, keys dangling in the ignition. A clipboard rested on the passenger seat, delivery manifest clipped to its surface. I pulled myself up into the cab and eased the door closed with barely a click. The guards moved between the parked cars, checking behind each one. One headed straight toward the truck. I slid down in the seat, pressing myself against the worn upholstery. His footsteps stopped at the rear of the truck. I heard the rattle of the loading door being tested, found secure. Then he moved on, circling around the far side. The driver emerged from the loading dock, pushing a dolly stacked with boxes. He wore a brown uniform, cap pulled low. He loaded the boxes into the truck's rear, then walked toward the cab. I sat up, meeting his startled expression through the windshield. "Need a ride," I said through the closed door. He shook his head, making shooing motions with his hands. I pulled out 2 20s from my wallet, pressed them against the window. His eyes darted toward the guards, then back to the money. He walked around to the passenger side and climbed in. "Where?" "Just drive. Out of here." The truck lurched forward, engine grinding as we navigated toward the exit ramp. I kept my head down, watching through the side mirror as the security guards converged where I'd been hiding moments before. One jabbed his finger toward our departing vehicle, but we'd already cleared the gate. The driver kept his eyes locked on the road, jaw working like he wanted to spit out words but couldn't find them. His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel as he merged into afternoon traffic. I studied the delivery manifest on the clipboard. Residential addresses, office buildings, a route that snaked through the eastern suburbs. "Drop me at the next commercial district," I said. He nodded once, sharp and final. We rode in silence for 10 minutes, the truck's suspension groaning over potholes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw the text from the number I'd called earlier that morning. "Got the records. You're not going to like this." My hands shook as I typed back. "Send everything." The driver pulled into a strip mall parking lot, killing the engine near a coffee shop. I handed him the rest of the cash in my wallet, maybe $60, and climbed down from the cab. He drove off without looking back, leaving me standing in the hot asphalt glare. I walked to the coffee shop and claimed a corner table, laptop already out of my bag before I sat down. The email arrived as I connected to the public Wi-Fi. 16 attachments, medical charts, incident reports, internal communications marked confidential. My son's name appeared on every page. Marcus Robinson, 27 years old, admitted for routine appendectomy. The first document showed standard pre-op vitals, normal across the board. Second document detailed the surgery itself, concluded without complications. Then the third document, a nursing note time-stamped 4 hours post-op. Patient appears distressed. Complaining of severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. Notified attending physician. My vision tunneled. I forced myself to read the next entry. Physician assessed patient, attributed symptoms to post-surgical anxiety. Ordered sedative. The sedative they gave him. I remembered that night, sitting beside his bed while he struggled to form words through the fog of medication. His hand had clutched mine, fingers digging into my palm like he was drowning. The nurse had smiled, told me he just needed rest. I clicked open the next file, an internal investigation report dated 2 weeks after Marcus died. The language shifted here, became clinical and distanced. Review of patient decline reveals failure to recognize symptoms of pulmonary embolism. Standard post-surgical protocols for blood clot prevention were not followed. Patient received incorrect medication in response to critical symptoms. My breath came in shallow gasps. The coffee shop sounds faded to white noise. I scrolled through the report's findings, each line driving deeper. They'd known. The hospital had known within days that someone's negligence had killed my son. They'd documented it, filed it away, sealed it behind legal protections. The final attachment was an email chain between hospital administrators and their legal team. Family accepted settlement offer. Signed NDA. Recommend closing internal review without external disclosure. I never signed anything. Never received a settlement offer. My fingers flew across the keyboard, opening my sent folder, searching through correspondence from that time. Nothing from the hospital's legal department. Nothing about settlements or non-disclosure agreements. Someone else had signed. Someone else had accepted money to bury the truth about how Marcus died. I pulled up my sister's contact information. She'd handled so much during those weeks after the funeral, when I couldn't function enough to open mail or return calls. My finger hovered over the call button. The coffee shop door chimed. 2 police officers entered, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. One spoke to the barista, showed her something on his phone. She turned, pointed directly at my corner table. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it into my bag. The rear exit sign glowed red near the restrooms. I stood, chair scraping loud against the tile floor. Both officers' heads swiveled toward the sound. I ran. Through the narrow hallway, past the bathrooms, hitting the emergency exit with both palms. The alarm shrieked as I burst into the alley behind the shopping center. Dumpsters lined one side, loading docks on the other. I sprinted left, bag bouncing against my hip, the laptop's weight threatening to pull me off balance. Footsteps pounded behind me. Radio chatter echoed off the brick walls. I reached the alley's end and cut right, emerging onto a side street lined with parked cars. A city bus idled at the light 1 block over, exhaust shimmering in the heat. I pushed my 63-year-old legs harder than I had in decades. My chest burned. The bus's doors started to close. I threw myself forward, slapping the rubber edge. They hissed open again. I climbed aboard, fumbling for my transit card, swiping it 3 times before it registered. The driver gave me a look but said nothing. I collapsed into the first empty seat as the bus pulled away. Through the rear window, I watched one officer emerge onto the side street, hand on his radio, but he didn't chase. We turned the corner and he disappeared from view. The bus lurched through downtown traffic, stopping every 2 blocks. I kept my head down, watching the reflections in the window glass. Every police cruiser we passed sent my pulse hammering against my ribs. The laptop burned hot through my bag like evidence of a crime, though everything I'd done was legal. Researching public records, downloading hospital board meeting minutes, taking screenshots of deleted social media profiles belonging to surgical staff who'd scattered to different states within 6 months of Marcus's death. At 5th Street, 3 passengers boarded. One was a woman in hospital scrubs, her badge still clipped to her collar. My stomach twisted. The logo was different. St. Mary's, not Riverside Medical where Marcus had died, but the sight of those navy blue scrubs made my hands clench. I turned away, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The bus climbed the hill toward the older residential neighborhoods. I got off at Maple, 2 stops before my actual destination. The doors wheezed shut behind me, and I walked 3 blocks east, then cut through an elementary school playground, circling back west through a residential alley. Old habits from my social work days, when home visits sometimes meant avoiding people who'd rather not be found. I reached the duplex 20 minutes later. Sweat soaked through my blouse despite the moderate temperature. My legs trembled as I climbed the steps to the 2nd-floor unit. The door opened before I could knock. "You look like hell," Patricia said, stepping aside to let me enter. I pushed past her into the living room, immediately moving to the window. The street below remained empty, just a teenager on a skateboard and someone walking a golden retriever. I pulled the curtain closed anyway. "They came to the coffee shop. 2 officers. Patricia's expression hardened. She was younger than me by 15 years, lean and angular where I'd grown soft with grief and sleepless nights. We'd met in a support group for families who'd lost children to medical negligence. Her daughter had been 22. "Did they see the files?" She moved to her kitchen counter where her own laptop sat surrounded by scattered papers. I pulled mine out, fingers still shaking as I powered it on. The screen flickered to life, showing the document I'd been reading when the police arrived. A former Riverside medical nurse's deposition from an unrelated malpractice suit, buried in court records from 3 years ago. She'd mentioned a culture of covering up medication errors in the surgical wing. The testimony had been sealed, but Patricia had found someone who'd made copies. I got everything uploaded to the cloud before I ran. I sank into her threadbare couch, my body finally acknowledging its exhaustion. My right knee throbbed. I'd twisted it somewhere in that sprint down the alley. Patricia brought me water in a chipped mug. I drank it in 4 long swallows, feeling the cool liquid settle the nausea churning in my gut. She sat across from me in a folding chair, watching with the patience of someone who'd conducted her own desperate investigations. The hospital's legal team filed an injunction this morning, she said, trying to block us from accessing any more personnel records. I set the empty mug down harder than intended. It cracked against her coffee table. We have a right to know what happened to our children. They're claiming harassment, defamation. Says we're orchestrating a targeted campaign against their staff. She pulled up an email on her phone, turned it so I could read. The language was dense, threatening, designed to intimidate. My jaw clenched so tight my molars ached. Marcus had been 28 years old when he'd gone in for routine gallbladder surgery. Healthy, strong, planning to propose to his girlfriend that Christmas. He'd died on the table, and the official report said massive hemorrhaging from a surgical complication. Unavoidable, tragic, but not negligent. But the anesthesiologist who'd been in that operating room had surrendered his medical license 4 months later. Quietly, no public explanation. He'd moved to Oregon and started working in a private clinic. The surgeon had taken a sudden sabbatical, then returned to work with a spotless record and no questions asked. The surgical nurse had transferred to pediatrics. 3 people directly involved in my son's death had scattered like roaches when the lights came on, and the hospital had paid me a settlement contingent on a non-disclosure agreement that I'd signed in a grief-stricken fog. I'd lived with that silence for 4 years. Then I'd met Patricia, and she'd shown me that silence was exactly what they counted on. The hospital's south entrance sat in shadow as I parked 3 blocks away, engine ticking as it cooled in the December night. My breath fogged the windshield. Patricia's car pulled up beside mine 5 minutes later, headlights cutting through the darkness before dying. She emerged wearing scrubs she'd borrowed from her sister, hair tucked under a surgical cap. I'd dressed the same way, the polyester fabric scratching against my skin as I adjusted the ID badge clipped to my chest. It belonged to a woman named Linda Chen, a radiology tech who'd quit 3 months ago. The badge still worked according to our source in environmental services. We crossed the parking lot separately, 30 seconds apart. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The badge reader beeped green when I swiped it. The door clicked open. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I walked through corridors I'd memorized from the building schematics Patricia had obtained. Right at the junction, left past the vending machines. Through the double doors marked, staff only. The records room sat in the basement, tucked behind the physical therapy department. Patricia caught up with me at the stairwell, her footsteps echoing on concrete steps. We descended 2 flights. The air grew cooler, tinged with the chemical smell of cleaning solutions and old paper. My hands trembled as I pushed through the fire door. The hallway stretched before us, empty except for a janitor's cart abandoned near a water fountain. "Second door on the right," Patricia whispered. I nodded. We moved quickly now, no longer pretending to belong. The records room door was locked, but Patricia pulled out a key card she'd paid $200 for. The reader flashed red. She tried again. Red. My stomach dropped. She adjusted the angle, swiped slower. Green. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls floor to ceiling. Computer terminals sat dark on metal desks. I went straight to the surgical records section while Patricia booted up the nearest computer. My fingers flew through the files, organized by date. November 2019, October, September. There. Marcus Robinson. I pulled the folder. The pages inside didn't match what I'd been given 4 years ago. Incident reports I'd never seen. Handwritten notes documenting the anesthesiologist's intoxication level. Blood alcohol content measured at 0.13. Internal emails discussing liability exposure, settlement strategies, media containment protocols. A memo from the hospital's legal team recommending immediate termination and NDA enforcement with all surgical staff present. My vision blurred. I gripped the folder so hard the manila bent under my fingers. They'd known. They'd known he was drunk when he put my son under. They'd known and covered it, buried it, paid everyone to forget. The door burst open behind me. 2 security guards filled the frame, one reaching for his radio while the other advanced into the room. Patricia jumped up from the computer, hands raised. I clutched the folder against my chest. "Put the file down," the closer guard ordered. He was young, maybe 30, with close-cropped hair and a hand on his belt where pepper spray hung in a holster. I backed toward the wall. "This is my son's medical record. I have a right." "You're trespassing." "Put it down now." The second guard spoke rapidly into his radio. "Backup requested. Basement level. Records breach." His words tumbled over each other. Patricia moved sideways, trying to position herself between me and them. The first guard grabbed her arm. She twisted free, knocked against a filing cabinet. The crash echoed through the small room. I ran, past them, through the door, down the hallway with the folder pressed against my ribs. Footsteps pounded behind me. My lungs burned. The stairwell door loomed ahead. I hit it hard, shoulder first, momentum carrying me through. My feet found the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, going up. First floor. I burst into the main corridor. Hospital staff turned to stare. A doctor shouted something. I kept running. The south entrance blazed ahead, glass doors reflecting my wild-eyed reflection. Almost there. A security guard appeared from a side corridor, arms spread wide to block my path. I feinted left, then dodged right. His fingers caught my scrub top, fabric tearing. I stumbled but didn't fall. The doors. I slammed into them. They opened. Cold air hit my face. My car waited 3 blocks away. I ran through the parking lot, across the street, past darkened storefronts. Behind me, sirens wailed. Story block 910. My apartment door lock clicked 3 times before my shaking hands managed to turn the key. Inside, I collapsed against the wall, lungs heaving, the stolen folder clutched against my chest like armor. Sweat soaked through the torn scrub top. Through the window, red and blue lights painted the street below in rhythmic patterns. They were searching the neighborhood. I crawled to the bathroom, keeping below the window line. In the harsh, fluorescent light, I spread the folder's contents across the tile floor. My fingers traced the handwritten notes in the margins. Dr. Chen, his signature appeared 3 times. The attending physician. The words, contraindicated, were circled in red ink next to the medication dosage. Someone had known. Someone had prescribed it anyway. A photograph slipped from between 2 pages. Marcus at 16, grinning in his basketball uniform. My throat constricted. I pressed my palm against the cold tile, forced air into my lungs. The medical examiner's report listed cardiac arrest as cause of death. But here, buried in the nursing notes, another story emerged. Adverse reaction. Code Blue called. Resuscitation unsuccessful. Timeline discrepancies jumped out. The medication administered at 2:47 p.m., the cardiac event at 2:52 p.m., the falsified chart showing 9:30 p.m. My phone vibrated. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. Then a text appeared. "They're at my house. Asking questions. Be careful." I gathered the documents, stuffing them back into the folder. The police wouldn't wait long. They'd trace my car, find my address in hospital records. I needed to move these somewhere safe first, somewhere beyond their reach. My neighbor, the retired lawyer who'd helped with Marcus's funeral arrangements. No, too obvious. They'd canvass everyone I knew. The fire escape rattled outside my window. My body went rigid. Footsteps scraped on metal. I killed the bathroom light, pressed against the wall. Through the crack under the door, shadows moved across my living room. They'd come in quietly, no sirens, no announcement. The apartment lock clicked, someone picking it with professional efficiency. I eased the bathroom window open. The alley stretched below, 3 stories down with a dumpster positioned halfway. The folder went first, sailing through darkness, landing with a muffled thump in cardboard boxes beside the dumpster. My legs swung over the sill. The fire escape ladder hung 15 feet up, retracted. I'd have to drop. "Police! Show yourself!" The bathroom door burst inward just as I let go. Air rushed past. My feet hit the dumpster lid with a metallic boom that reverberated through the alley. Pain shot up both legs. I rolled sideways, hit the pavement hard. Above, flashlight beams cut through the darkness from my bathroom window. Radio chatter crackled. I grabbed the folder from the boxes and limped toward the alley's mouth. A squad car blocked the street exit. Its occupants hadn't heard the commotion yet, were focused on their radio. I reversed direction, heading deeper into the alley. Chain link fence at the end, 8 feet high with razor wire across the top. My hands found holds in the metal diamonds. I climbed, despite the screaming protest from my ankle. Behind me, officers poured from my building's rear entrance. "Stop! Police!" The fence top bit into my palms. I threw the folder over first, then hauled myself up. Razor wire caught my sleeve, tore through fabric into flesh. Blood ran warm down my forearm. I kicked free, dropped to the other side. The folder lay in mud. I snatched it up and ran. This neighborhood knew me. I'd walked these streets for 30 years. The shortcut through the laundromat's back lot, the gap between the Vietnamese restaurant and the hair salon, the basement entrance to the community center that never latched properly. I used them all. My pursuer's footsteps faded, confused by the maze of passages and dead ends. 15 minutes later, I emerged 6 blocks away at the 24-hour copy center. The clerk, a young woman with purple hair and headphones, barely glanced up from her phone. I fed documents into the scanner one by one, created digital files, uploaded them to 3 different email addresses. Then, I made 5 paper copies of everything, stuffing sets into separate envelopes. The clerk noticed my torn clothes, the blood on my arm. Her eyes widened. "Fell jogging," I said. "Can I use your phone?" She handed it over without comment. I dialed the number I'd memorized 3 months ago, the investigative journalist who'd covered medical malpractice cases. Her voicemail picked up. I left detailed instructions about the evidence locations, named every person involved, gave dates and times. When I finished, the clerk was watching me with new understanding in her eyes. "You need to go," she whispered. "Now." Through the front window, a police cruiser rolled past slowly, spotlights sweeping storefronts. I handed back her phone, grabbed 4 of the envelope copies, and pushed through the rear exit into the pre-dawn darkness. Story block 1010. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in the community center where Marcus had once played basketball as a teenager. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the faces of 47 people seated in folding chairs arranged in neat rows. My hands rested on the smooth wood surface, fingers tracing the grain worn soft by countless speakers before me. The banner stretched across the back wall. Marcus Robinson Patient Safety Foundation. His name in bold blue letters against white fabric. My chest tightened, but I kept breathing, kept standing. Behind me, the exhibit boards displayed enlarged photographs of Marcus at every age. Gap-toothed at 7, proud in his high school graduation gown, holding his niece at her christening. The last photo showed him in his construction company uniform, hard hat tucked under one arm, smile radiant. I looked down at my notes, though I'd memorized every word. My throat felt thick, but I pushed through. Thank you all for coming to our first support group meeting. The attendees shifted in their seats. A woman in the third row dabbed her eyes with a tissue. An elderly man gripped his cane with white knuckles. They'd all lost someone to medical errors, preventable deaths covered by silence and institutional power. The sliding doors at the back opened. Detective Chen entered, now promoted to captain after the investigation exposed corruption within the department. She nodded once, respectfully, then took a seat near the exit. 3 other officers had faced criminal charges. The hospital's chief of surgery had resigned. Dr. Chen was serving 18 months for evidence tampering and fraud. I stepped away from the podium, moved among the rows of chairs. A young father clutched a folder containing his wife's records. A teenage girl wore her brother's football jersey, the fabric hanging loose on her thin frame. Each person carried their grief like a physical weight, shoulders curved, eyes hollowed. We start by listening, I said. No one leaves here unheard. The sessions ran for 2 hours. People spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing strength. They shared medical documents, described the lies they'd been told, the gaslighting, the institutional machinery that ground their loved ones into statistics. I moved between them, touching shoulders, squeezing hands, bearing witness to pain that mirrored my own. When the meeting ended, people didn't rush to leave. They clustered in small groups, exchanging phone numbers, forming connections forged by shared trauma. The young father showed photos of his wife to the elderly man. The teenage girl laughed at something another member said. The first genuine laugh I'd heard from her all afternoon. I gathered papers at the front table, organizing intake forms and resource lists. The journalist who'd broken the story, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine who'd received my voicemail 6 months ago, approached with her camera. May I take some photos for the follow-up piece? Of course. She captured the banner, the exhibit boards, the groups of people talking quietly. Through her lens, she documented what justice looked like after the headlines faded. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but real. People helping people. The slow, grinding work of creating change. Later, I locked the community center doors and walked to Marcus's grave in the evening light. The headstone had weathered slightly, settling into the earth. I knelt, brushed away fallen leaves, placed fresh flowers in the built-in vase. 47 people today, I whispered. Next week, we're expecting 60. The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead. Traffic hummed on the distant highway. I pressed my palm against the cool granite, feeling the carved letters of his name under my fingers. The foundation had already helped 12 families file successful lawsuits. We'd lobbied for new patient safety legislation. 3 bills currently working through the state Congress. Medical schools were adopting our training protocols. The ripples spread outward, touching systems that had seemed immovable. I stood, joints protesting, and walked back to my car. My phone buzzed with a text from the young father. "Thank you for today. First time I've felt understood since it happened." I typed back quickly. "You're not alone anymore." At home, I made tea and sat at Marcus's desk, now transformed into the Foundation's command center. File boxes lined one wall, labeled by case number and status. The laptop screen glowed with spreadsheets tracking donations, volunteer schedules, pending legislation. On the bulletin board, new faces stared out from photographs, people who'd died from errors that should never have happened. My reflection caught in the darkened window. Older, grayer, but standing straight. The woman who'd discovered her son's death was preventable had transformed into someone who prevented other deaths. The weight hadn't lessened, but I'd learned to carry it differently. I opened my journal, dated the entry, and wrote, Day 183. Support group launched. The work continues. For Marcus. For all of them. The pen felt steady in my hand. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.